Welcome to my first vegetable garden. Today's all about learning when to start your tomato plants indoors for transplants and how to do that. I'll be going over all of that. First key is tomato plants are warm weather crops. They like, yes, warm temperatures. They can't take a frost. But what people overlook is that tomato plants, pepper plants, eggplants, just did a video on pepper plants before this one, really enjoy warm soil. They need the warmth of the soil so that when you put your transplants out there, they take off, they thrive, and they grow. If you grow a tomato transplant or any warm weather crop transplant indoors and you get it to a great size, maybe it's been growing way too long, it's huge, you go and put it outside into cold soil, the top 2, 4, 6, 8 inches, the plant's just going to sit there. So timing for when you start your tomato plants indoors is really about when is the danger of frost gone in your area and when is the soil temperature really in the 60s. Now, you don't have to go take a thermometer to measure your soil temperature. When the nights are staying in the 50s, maybe a dip into the 40s, the days are getting into the upper 60s, 70s, even maybe touching the 80s sometimes, you're getting warm rains, that soil temperature is starting to warm up. So you have to kind of figure that date out. Here in Maryland, that's around May 15th. You can always protect these plants when the cold comes, like for a frost night, a little bit. But when you're doing it over and over again, protecting them from the frost because you wanted them out early, the plants are just going to turn purple and sit there. They're not going to grow, they're not going to thrive. The tomato plants right here, these are 31 days old. That's plenty large enough for a transplant size here in Maryland. The other tip I have is don't grow these longer than you have to. You could let these grow another 4 weeks. They're going to be large. You have to really pay attention to the size of the roots. We'll be talking about that when I show you how to plant the seeds and get them started. A large, big plant with tiny roots isn't really healthy. You're going to put that outside. The sun's going to hit the leaves. The little root system's not going to be able to supply enough water and nutrients to the plant. Everything's going to kind of slow down till that root system grows. So you're really thinking about a nice root system, good upper growth, but more importantly, getting these out into the ground when the soil temperatures are warmer. The tomatoes down here, just FYI, they are also 31 days old. Tomatoes over here, this is a dwarf variety. I'll be doing a video series on growing dwarf tomatoes indoors. These are tiny Tims, and these are 14 days added to that. These are 45 days old. So that's about, what, 6 weeks worth of growth. So right now you can kind of get a sense that 4 to 8 weeks, I like to go about 6 weeks, is really all the growth you need for your tomato plants. To figure that out, I want my plants to go into the ground, let's say May 1st. That's when I feel the soil temperatures warm up. Chance of frost is pretty much gone, but I can protect them if needed. So I'm going to count back 4 weeks. That takes me to April 1st. Another 2 weeks. That takes me to mid-March. So mid-March is when I would start my tomato transplants indoors. And this again is 31 days of growth from putting the seed on the soil, not after germination. So 6 to 8 weeks is about all you need for tomato plants to get them a good amount of growth indoors, and they're going to be beautiful. And again, if I put, let's just say these plants were twice the size, they've been growing inside for 8 or 9 weeks, I put them outside into cold soil, they're just going to sit there, meaning that 2, 3 weeks later when that warm soil comes, if I drop a tomato plant in like this, it's going to catch up to that plant that I spent all that time growing indoors, put out early. Even though it's bigger, they're both not going to take off until that soil is warm. So you don't get a benefit of putting out big tomato plants, big transplants into cold soil. I really want to stress that because most people don't consider that when growing their transplants indoors. I want to talk about root size. You know, warm soil is something people don't consider a lot or haven't learned about. And then the size of the roots do make a difference. This is your standard 6-cell. This is a 4-cell. More starting mix obviously goes into there. And then this is a larger 6-cell with a lot of starting mix. The root systems are going to fill up the amount of space they have in there. That's pretty straightforward. What people don't think about is if I start seeds in here all at the same time, we start tomato seeds all at the same time, germinates, say in 7 days, They get 4 weeks of growth after germination. They're all going to be about the same size. We wait another 2 weeks, we get it to that 6 weeks of growing your transplants indoors. Because we're adding water and we're adding nutrients and we're keeping all this moist, the upper growth, they're all going to be about the same. What's going to be different is the roots in here will be a little bit root bound. There'll be less. The roots in here starting to get root bound. You know, a little bit less space for root growth because the roots are filling this up. This cell is going to have a nice massive root system. There's not going to be much coiling at all down here. You're still going to have space for some root development. The root system here is larger. When you take these outside, and remember they're all going to be about the same size, and you put this into the ground, it only has this many roots, let's just say. This one has that many roots. This one has a lot more roots. What does that awkward way of explanation mean? That when I have a big growth, a big canopy of green here, this tiny root system, in a couple of hours, a full sunny day, can suck all the moisture out from around here, and your plant is going to be stressed and struggle. It's going to take longer for this amount of roots, going to take longer for this amount of starting mix supporting roots to run out of water. So you have to make sure, number one, you're watering these almost every day, because even though you have a big garden that maybe it's soaked, the roots, the plant can only pull in moisture from this many roots. What does that mean? A bigger root system means that your plants are going to establish better outside, establish more quickly, and the growth is going to take off. And I do recommend these larger containers. I sell all this at my seed shop. Also, sometimes you're going to have to pot up your tomato plants from here into a larger container or into a larger container, depending on what you're growing, what kind of plants you're growing. But this saves you from having to pot up. This is beautiful. If you're, if you're growing like 70 plants indoors, you're going to need something like this because maybe you don't have a lot of space. If you're growing, 6, 8 plants indoors, these are going to work really well. If you don't want to use these, yogurt cups, holes cut in the bottom, water bottles cut in half, holes poked in the bottom, that will make a perfect size base for a nice root system to develop with your tomato plants. I just really wanted to stress that because people don't fully understand it. They think when they put the plant out in the garden, everything's going to be fine, and a root ball that's really small is going to run out of water. And without water, the plant of course is going to die off, but it also can't pull in nutrients. So growing is going to be much more slow versus a larger root system. Planting tomatoes is pretty straightforward. They're going to germinate in 5 to 7 days. In your house, temperatures around 68 degrees. That's plenty warm enough for your seeds to germinate. You don't need to use a heat mat on your tomato plants. About 1/4 inch. You don't need to worry about it. I've done experiments where I've planted seeds 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and all the way down at the bottom of these, and they all actually do grow and sprout. But 1/4 inch is about all you need. And you would just press in the mark. I like to drop 2 seeds into each hole in case one doesn't germinate. You're not waiting around, and then you just cover the hole up. You would bottom water. You have your plants seeded, ready to grow for your transplants. If you check out the video description, I have a whole series on growing indoors. Covers everything: lighting, fertilizing, watering, containers, everything you need to know to grow healthy transplants indoors. Now, again, you're trying to do this timing wise. I know that the tomatoes here germinated really quickly in 5 days. So these are 31 days old from putting in the seed. You technically want to watch for germination, and then as soon as germination happens, because sometimes they can take 7 days, 10 days, maybe 14 days. I'll give you an example of what I mean. After they germinate, that's when you go into your count for about 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I say 8 weeks at the most. You don't need tomato transplants bigger than that. And the timing again is when the soil outside is warm. Chance of frost is pretty much gone. You can see right here that this guy is 31 days old. It germinated really quickly. It's a great size. And then way after that, 3 weeks later, this one germinated. And you can see example right here, a smaller tomato right there. Now at this point you would thin these down. Like when the tomatoes get to about this high, if you have more than one in there, remove that plant. You can divide them if you want, but at least get it out of there. You only want one plant growing per cell. So at 31 days, this is what the root system looks like. I don't know, maybe I took the whole thing off the screen here. Sorry about that. Let me get it right in there. That's what the root system looks like at 31 days in these larger cells. So it still has time to grow in here. And in case I messed up, let me just show it again. This guy germinated well after these plants, and you can see how small it is. So timing, you're looking for germination for tomatoes 5 to 7 days typically in a house at 65 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer. And then 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks of growth after that at the most. The last thing that's really important to understand is that these are growing inside without the sun hitting them. They have no resistance against the UV rays of the sun. So if you grow the most beautiful transplants indoors, put them directly outside that day, on a sunny day, the sun is going to kill these off. You have to transition all your plants that you're growing indoors slowly outside over a 7-day period. And that means, 20 minutes the first day, a little bit longer the next day, etc. And you're getting them used to the sun. So you put them outside, let them sit out for a while, bring them inside. And then they're going to toughen up to the wind, the colder temperatures, the UV rays of the sun, and they're going to make perfect transplants. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com. You can find all your starting supplies there. And just remember, tomato plants want to get into the warm soil. You don't have to grow them inside for as long as you think, and make sure you acclimate them to the outdoors before you put them into the ground. Thanks for watching.